In the late 19th century, Europe stood on the edge of enormous change. It was a continent dominated by imperial ambition, nationalism, and the constant rivalry between powerful states. Among these powers, two stood out above the rest. The second, French Empire under Napoleon III, and the rising force of the North German Confederation, which was effectively led by the Kingdom of Prussia and its brilliant chancellor. The balance of power was shifting. France had long been considered the strongest continental power in Europe, inheriting both the prestige of Napoleon Bonaparte's empire and the influence of its cultural, military, and economic might. But across the Rhine, a new force was stirring. Prussia, fresh off its decisive victory in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, had demonstrated its growing strength. That war not only weakened Austria, but also unified many northern German states. Under Prussian leadership, suddenly, France's dominance looked threatened. Historians still debate whether Bismarck deliberately engineered a war with France, or whether Napoleon III fell into the trap of his own overconfidence. What is clear, however, is that tensions between the two nations escalated rapidly, when soon Europe was heading toward one of the most significant conflicts of the 19th century, the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71. After 1866, Bismarck's goal was clear. He wanted the unification of all German states under Prussia. Yet this posed a direct threat to France. If the German states united, France would no longer be the unquestioned leader of continental Europe. Napoleon III feared this outcome and attempted to block Prussia's rise. In a bold move, Napoleon demanded that Prussia restore France's old borders from 1814, a demand that would have weakened Bismarck's position and strengthened French influence. But Bismarck immediately refused. Instead, he cleverly used Napoleon's request to build stronger ties with the southern German states Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden. He revealed Napoleon's demands to them, portraying France as a bully, and in doing so, he secured military alliances with those states. Bismarck also understood something crucial: a war against France, especially if France could be portrayed as the aggressor, would ignite German nationalism and rally all the divided German states together. For his long-term goal of unification, this was the perfect opportunity. The real spark came from an unlikely source. Spain was searching for a new monarch, and the candidacy of Prince Leopold of Hohenzollern, a relative of the Prussian king, alarmed the French government. If a German prince were to sit on the Spanish throne, France feared it would be surrounded by a Prussian-Spanish alliance. Napoleon III demanded that the Prussian king, Wilhelm I, promise never to support Leopold's candidacy. Wilhelm politely declined, but Bismarck saw an opportunity. He altered and released a telegram known as the Ems Dispatch, making it sound as though the Prussian king had insulted the French ambassador. The effect was explosive. In France, newspapers and politicians fumed. The public, whipped up by nationalists' pride, demanded revenge for the supposed humiliation. Empress Eugenie, Napoleon's wife, urged war. Ministers, too, felt that France could not back down without losing face. On July 19, 1870, France officially declared war on Prussia. Exactly as Bismarck had hoped, the southern German states now joined the North German Confederation. For the first time in centuries, Germany was united in a common cause. France's leaders believed the war would be short and glorious. The French army, they assumed, was the finest in Europe. They expected Austria or even Italy might join them against Prussia. But reality quickly proved otherwise. Austria, humiliated by its defeat in 1866, considered intervening, but it hesitated. Without firm alliances, France stood alone. Meanwhile, the Germans mobilized with astonishing speed and efficiency. Prussia had reformed its military, investing in railroads, logistics, and the modern needle gun rifle. Their armies were well coordinated, disciplined, and eager to fight. The French initially struck at Saarbrücken, a border town, and achieved a small victory. But this success was short-lived. As three massive German armies advanced, Napoleon III quickly realized his position was collapsing. France's mobilization was chaotic, plagued by poor communication and outdated organization. By August, German forces had seized the initiative. A series of battles worth Spitzer and Gravelotte pushed the French steadily backward. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Sedan on September 1st, 1870. Here, Napoleon III himself took command of the French army. But the Germans encircled. The French, in a crushing maneuver, trapped and outnumbered, Napoleon's army suffered terrible losses by the end of the day. Napoleon III surrendered himself, and his army of more than 100,000 men. It was one of the most humiliating defeats in French history. News of the emperor's capture stunned Paris. The people revolted, and within days, the Second French Empire collapsed. On September 4th, 1870, the Third French Republic was proclaimed, yet the new government refused to surrender. Instead, they vowed to continue the war, calling it a struggle for national survival. Bismarck, however, pressed on. German armies marched directly to Paris, surrounding the French capital. From September 1870 to January 1871, the city endured a brutal siege lasting 130 days. Food shortages gripped the population. Parisians resorted to eating horses, dogs, and even zoo animals to survive. Attempts to break the siege failed. The French armies outside Paris were too weak, and their efforts to relieve the city collapsed. Inside, morale sank lower each day. Suffering became unbearable. Finally, in January 1871, French government had no choice but to seek peace. Negotiations began at Versailles, inside the very palace that symbolized French power and glory. The terms were harsh. France agreed to surrender the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine to the new. Germans stayed in to pay a massive indemnity. And on January 18th, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the German princes gathered. In a symbolic and humiliating ceremony for the French, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed emperor of a unified Germany. The German Kaiser, the dream of German unification, was finally realized, and it had come at the expense of France. The Franco-Prussian War changed the course of European history. France was humiliated, its empire destroyed, and its political system shaken. The loss of Alsace-Lorraine would become a wound that festered for decades, fueling French anger and the desire for revenge, desire that would eventually contribute to the outbreak of World War I for Germany. The war was a triumph. The nation had been united under Prussia, and the new German Empire was now the strongest power on the continent. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, had achieved his vision through cunning diplomacy and ruthless strategy. The war was short, lasting less than a year, but its consequences reshaped Europe for generations. A new balance of power had emerged, one in which Germany stood tall. In France, once the master of Europe, had been humbled. The Franco-Prussian War was not just a clash of armies, but a turning point in history. It marked the birth of modern Germany and the fall of Napoleon III's empire. From the battlefields of Sedan to the halls of Versailles, the echoes of this conflict would be felt across Europe well into the 20th century.